Hello! Thank you for joining Craig's Gun Channel this week. This week we're going to be going over the 1911 45. It's kind of a firearm everyone's familiar with, but just a little bit of history in case you didn't know. The 1911 was designed by John Browning for submission to the 1906 U.S. Ordnance Trials. It was accepted and adopted in 1911, and that's where the name came from, and was named the model of 1911. It was later just shortened to the M1911. In 1926, there was some design refinements, nothing major. It was mostly cosmetic things and things to kind of change the feel of the gun. The backstrap was kind of broadened out a little bit, and there's some scalloping that was put around the trigger area and to allow more ability for people with smaller hands to be able to operate it. And that was designated the M1911A1. It remained in primary military service until it was replaced by the Beretta 92 in 1985. And however, there's some special forces units and some select units of the military that continue to use the firearm to this day. That's over 100 years of service for a firearm, and that's quite an achievement. It utilizes the 45 ACP cartridge and standardly holds 7 rounds in a single column magazine, with one in the chamber that's a total of 8 rounds that are available. The design was adopted by many militaries and police organizations throughout the world, and in fact the example that we're going to be going over today was manufactured by Argentina under license from Colt in 1949, and that's this pistol right here. In all sense and purpose, it's a standard GI configuration, model 1911 A1, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at it, see how the function controls of it, and basic operation. As is always the case, before working on a firearm, you need to make sure that it is in fact empty and that there's no ammunition in it, and therefore safe to work on. On a 1911, this button right here is the magazine release, and you simply push that button in and it will release the magazine, allowing you to remove it from the firearm. As we can see here, the magazine is in fact empty. There's no ammunition in it. Next step would be to ensure that there's no ammunition in the firearm either. Just because the magazine is empty does not mean that the gun is in fact empty. So we'll pull the slide back to open the action, and as we can see, there's no ammunition inside, so it is safe to operate. So we'll go ahead and go over the basic controls of the 1911 45. And first, of course, is the magazine release. We already discussed that. You would push that button in to release the magazine. Then you have the trigger and the hammer. Now, those are the main operating components for the fire control system. Now, the trigger itself is a single action trigger on a 1911, which basically means all it does is it serves to release the hammer. The hammer has to be cocked back either by action of the slide or by manually cocking it back. So when you cock it back like that, it's ready to fire, and then you could pull the trigger. However, on the 1911 45, there's what's called a grip safety, and the grip safety is right here, and it goes in and out, and it's designed so that when you are holding the firearm in a grip to shoot, your hand will push in on that, and basically without that being pushed in, the trigger cannot function. When that's pushed in, the trigger can function to fire the weapon. So that's the grip safety. Now, the firearm also has a regular manual safety, and that's this lever right here. You would push up on it, and it does two things. It will lock the hammer from being able to move, so it won't fire, and it also engages in that notch in the slide, so the slide itself cannot be pulled back to basically do anything with. It locks it in place. So when that's in place, it cannot be fired. To release it, you would just pull down on it, and that disengages it from that notch and also releases the lock on the hammer, so that then when you engage the grip safety and pull the trigger, it would be able to fire. Now, this lever right here is the slide lock and the disassembly lever. So I'll show you the slide lock first. Now the magazine has a tab in it right there that when it's empty, the tab is up. When ammunition is in it, of course, that would go down and wouldn't be visible. And that tab will push up on this lever on the inside of the gun. There's a protrusion that sticks through, and the magazine pushes up on it. So when the magazine's in there, when the last round is fired, it will push up on that lever, and that lever will then engage a notch in the slide right there, and that will lock the slide back. Now to release the slide, you would just have to pull down on that lever, and that will release it. Now the lever can manually be pushed forward or upward as well. You can pull the slide back and manually push up on that lever, and that will lock the slide back as well. So those are the controls of the firearm. So now we'll move on to how do you field strip it for routine maintenance. So the first step, on the 1911, this little like a button thing there, it's called the recoil spring plug. Now the recoil spring in the 1911 travels under the barrel. It's inside the gun. It's in this space right here. And the spring goes into this plug. This plug locks into this half moon shaped notch there in this little assembly here that goes around the barrel. That's what's called the barrel bushing. It serves a couple functions. For one, it locks into place and it acts as a bushing to help tighten up the barrel in the frame. So the first step would be to remove the recoil spring, and to do that you would push down on it. That would disengage it from that notch. You then turn this clockwise out of the way. Now this is under pressure, so you'd slowly let the pressure off, and then you can remove the recoil spring and the plug. Now the spring just comes out of that plug for cleaning. So we can set that aside. Now the barrel bushing itself, to remove that, you would then turn it counterclockwise to this position right here, and then it will just lift off. And you can set that aside. The next step, if you notice in the slide, there's the notch here that this slide lock or disassembly lever will lock into. That's what locks the slide back. There's a little smaller notch there. It's a little half moon shaped notch, and that's what's called the takedown notch. And you would align that with this section right here, and there's a little half moon shape that's under the slide, under that notch there. So we're going to cock the hammer back so you can slide the slide back easier. And you would simply pull the slide back until that lines up, and then from the other side of the gun, that lever has a pivot pin that goes through, and it looks like a little button over here. You would just push down on that, and that will then push out, and then you can lift this out of the way. This is the slide stop and also the locking piece that holds the slide on. You then slide the slide off the front of the gun. So set the frame aside, and then that leaves the barrel and slide assembly. Now there's a recoil spring guide. It's this piece right here. You would be able to lift that out, and you can set that aside. That leaves then the barrel and the barrel link. The barrel link is this little link right here, and this pin actually goes through that link and then of course through the frame, so it locks the barrel to the frame, and that does a couple different things. It will keep the barrel from moving very far, and it also, that pivot link, if you notice when it pivots back and forth, it kind of goes up and down, and that actually is what locks and unlocks the barrel into the slide. So go ahead and push that forward. You can slide the barrel out of the front of the slide. Now on the barrel itself, it has these locking lugs. There's a couple of them right there. those will mate into the slide in these recesses right here. And that's what locks the barrel and the slide together when you fire, to keep the pressures in check for a long enough period of time to drop to a safe level before it opens up. So when that's in place, everything's nice and tight, it's locked. To unlock, it would have to lift up. Now, that's where that pivot point comes in. As the slide goes back, that pivot it'll come back, and as it pivots, it lifts, or in this case, rather, it pulls the barrel out of those notches and allows that to unlock and slide back. So, for cleaning purposes, you would want to clean all of the slide mating surfaces. Basically, everything in here you'd want to clean out real good, and then there again, put a light coating of good quality gun oil on it to help prevent corrosion and also to lubricate it. The barrel you would want to clean both inside and out, and there again, you put a light coating of oil on it for protection and for operation. And then assembly is basically just the reverse of all of those steps. So, well, we'll look at the frame here first. On the frame, this is your ejector, which will eject the empty cartridge from the slide when it comes back. And you really don't want to take any of this stuff apart here. There's various pins and stuff to disassemble everything. There's all these pins, and there's a pin here. Unless you feel very comfortable working on any of that, you should leave all of that stuff alone. For routine maintenance and for just general cleaning, you don't really need to take it any farther apart than this. You should make sure you have someone that's a qualified, certified gunsmith if you need to have any further work done to it. Or there again, if it's work that you're going to try to undertake yourself, make sure that you really know what you're doing. Because as always, if you damage or change any of the geometry of any of the parts inside, it could render the firearm inoperable or unsafe to fire. So you want to obviously avoid both of those. So generally speaking, you want to pretty much just go down to this point here. There again, you'd want to clean everything out, wipe it all down, put a thin coating of gun oil on it for rust and corrosion prevention, and also to help in lubricating the firearm for operation. So, to reassemble, first step is we'll put the slide and the barrel back together. So you'd slide the barrel in and slide it all the way in until it's locked into those notches. Your spring guide, you'll go ahead and put that in. If you notice, it's got a little half moon type shape. That would go against the barrel. So it goes in here just like that. And at this point, you would align the engagement surfaces on the slide with the rails on the frame. And slide it in place. The little takedown notch you would want to align with where that lever is going to go. The pin for the takedown lever and slide stop, you'd go ahead and put in. And on the inside, and this is going to be hard to see, the pivot pin, you need to align with this hole as well so that goes through. So you might need to manipulate it back and forth a little bit so that then that can go through. And then you simply push this into place so it goes into that notch. And then once that's pushed down all the way flush, you can push forward on the slide and it's all locked back together. Go ahead and put the hammer down. The hammer will help to hold the slide in place so that then you can put the spring Well, first step, get your barrel bushing. And put it in place. It will only go in one way. Once it's in, go ahead and flip it around to the other side. Looking at the firearm, it would be at the 9 o'clock position. Put the spring and the spring plug back into place. Push down, pivot over the bushing until it locks into its engagement surface on the plug, and it's back assembled. You'd want to function test everything, make sure it works, and it's reassembled. Well, I hope this information was helpful for you. The overall design is still largely the same now, even though it's produced by a variety of manufacturers. The original design is still very much alive, and it retains pretty much true to its original specifications that were laid out in 1906. It's quite an achievement, just a testament to the genius of John Browning as far as his ability to manufacture a firearm. And so we'll go ahead and wrap that up for this week. And as always, I will see you next week, and be safe.